Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dragon Plus live stream. I am your host, as always, or usually, Bart Carroll, and with me, returning as our guest this week, Jeremy Crawford.
Hi, everyone.
Jeremy, for folks that might not be aware of him, lead rules designer of Dungeons & Dragons, lead designer of the Player's Handbook, and the game's managing editor.
So many titles.
So many titles. Well, welcome back. We started a conversation 2 weeks ago regarding more of the design process. We did not nearly get through even our first topic, which was the order domain for cleric. So we wanted to loop back around, talk further about the order domain. We had a lot of questions from chat, which we appreciate very much. We went back through the chat logs, compiled a few of those, and we'll actually address some of your questions that we neglected last time.
Which doesn't mean you can't ask new questions.
Yes, and please do. As always, just give us a capital question in the chat. That'll help call it out to us as it scrolls by, and then it'll catch our eye. And then we'll mangle your handle name and try and get to your question. Before we begin, yes, very exciting news. We announced the Stream of Many Eyes this morning. So we can finally stop tiptoeing around that on our live streams without accidentally revealing. The next live stream event will be June 1st through 3rd in Los Angeles. You can find out more information, dnd.wizards.com/SOME for Stream of Many Eyes.
I'm looking forward to it.
Will you be there?
I will be there.
Excellent. Very nice. Yes, there are tickets available for the last day for Sunday. We're making the 4 live stream games available as a ticketed event, which also includes a tour of the studio and a bag of merch and lots of cool stuff. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. But we still have to tiptoe around what we're going to announce at the Stream of Many Eyes.
Yes, as we did last year for Stream of Annihilation, that was our campaign setting kickoff, as it will be again this year as well. So.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm a little punchy. We were up late doing fine-tuning on the announcements and up early getting it out the door, but excited to be here today. So before we begin, the other thing that I'll just, I don't even know why, just because it was top of the mind, Wizards of the Coast generously brought the employees to see a screening of The Avengers on Friday.
Yes.
So
that was that very important 2-hour and 45-minute meeting we all attended.
Yes, it was. So yes, without screaming spoilers or anything, did you enjoy the movie?
I did. I read the original Infinity Gauntlet series years ago. I'm also a big Doctor Strange fan.
Yes.
So there were many moments that were huge fun in that movie.
Yes, I think I speak for a lot of us when there was, this isn't a big spoiler, but the witty banter with Doctor Strange and calling him a wizard landed well in the Wizards of the Coast crowd.
Yes.
Because he is a wizard.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
This is my only claim to the Avengers fame is last year I took my vacation abroad and I was in the UK and I was in Edinburgh when they were filming those
scenes there.
Yeah. Nice. I had no idea what was going on, but all the streets were blocked and there was this massive smoke coming down where they had set off pyrotechnics. I'm like, oh my God, there's been an attack. And they're like, oh no, we're filming the Avengers.
It's just the Avengers.
It's just yeah.
They were attacking.
They were, but yeah, it was super cool. And we were speaking beforehand from traveling this year. I was in different parts abroad, realizing how convenient it is in the Forgotten Realms that Common is spoken pretty universally throughout.
Like, why don't we have this on Earth?
Yes, one common language, and then there's also no currency conversions for your gold coins, depending on whether you're going to Chult or wherever else. So.
But how risky that is, walking around with actual gold.
Yeah, I guess that's how they used to. You have to have done that back in the day, right?
Yeah.
The cut purse comes from the actual cutting of your purse.
You can't call someone up and cancel your gold coins.
But yeah, I've been hacked.
Right. Yeah.
Someone's minting my coins with my logo. In any case, so I'm imagining a great percentage of our audience is already seen the Avengers, if not already, then at least multiple times already. So
we'll wait to spoil it in our next talk.
Yes, let's do that. because I have lots of theories and lots of opinions. Greg Tito and I are also planning a long-form discussion about our opinions on the recent Star Wars movies.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
I've overheard those before. There will be fireworks, everyone, if you watch this.
Actually, we're probably not allowed to talk to Star Wars or Marvel too much, considering our parent company.
Oh yeah, true.
May or may not be in that business. So moving along, let's go into some of the questions from last time. And again, if you do have questions for Jeremy, actually, before I jump into some of the past questions, let's set it up a little bit. Part of the reasons we wanted to have you on was specifically following Mike Merles' Happy Fun Hour. Mike does some of the initial design work, obviously, for the brand. There's other designers. You're one of the designers for the brand as well. But we wanted to also kind of talk through a bit more of what that process is, not just putting the pen to paper, but then where does it go from there?
Yeah, and since you and I have discovered we have fun talking about this, as long as those of you out there want to hear us talk about this, we are likely to keep coming back to this design process to talk about the development of rules later in the process, but we'll even loop back around to talk about some of the initial design. It's something that Mike delves into in his Happy Fun Hour, but as Bart mentioned, there are actually a number of people who do initial design for the game, and I can offer some insight on how some of us have design practices similar to what you're seeing in the Happy Fun Hour, and some of us approach the work in other ways, depending on the type of project we're working on.
No, I think it's, well, granted, I'm jaded because I like having these discussions and I think they're valuable, but part of the reasons I do think they're valuable is just for the education of the designers that are watching.
Yes.
I mean, we have the DMs Guild. If you're interested in design work, God, I wish I had this when I was, before I was working at Wizards of the Coast, but to be able to put your design work up for sale on the DMs Guild is fantastic. So we wanted to kind of help, I suppose, open the books a little bit on what that design process is like internally, not just to help showcase what it is we're doing, but to help inform other designers that are interested in the hobby.
Absolutely.
What to do.
And not only for DMs Guild, but also if you try to eventually work for us or another game company. But also these talks in our minds are about empowering you as dungeon masters, because we know many of you like to come up with house rules, you like to on the spot make special rulings. The more that we can help you have confidence about how the rules are designed, why they're designed the way they're designed, the more I think you'll feel confident to reshape the game the way you see fit for your game, which is ultimately our goal. Because as I've often said, D&D belongs to all of us who play it and DM it. It's wonderful that it can mutate at every table to match the taste of a particular group. And so we want you to be able to engage in that mutation with confidence.
It's a challenging skill. I'm the design side of things as the dungeon master, but also it just calls to mind presenting it to your table. You have to morph it depending on who your players are, what their preferred playing style is. It's a challenging role to be a dungeon master. So my hat's off to everyone that does it. And so yeah, again, to kind of go back to our goal of giving you as many tools as possible. Yeah. To enjoy the hobby that we all very much love.
Now hit me with some questions.
All right. Yes, I will move on. Let's talk. These were questions that folks had asked last time in chat. We didn't quite get around to them, so we wanted to call a few of them out. Kyber Crystal had asked, what's it like deciding what types of creatures get focused on in each book? We've got Morning Cannon's Tome of Foes coming out shortly now. And so what was it like deciding the types of creatures in there?
So it's always fun when we're coming up with the monsters that are going to go into not only any of our monster books, but also monsters that will get focused on in a particular adventure, because it's a chance for us to look at the game's history and see what are some of the critters in the past we've loved, and we want to, see them featured once again. Maybe they haven't gotten the spotlight in a while. And so There is some nostalgia in play because many of us working on the game have been playing D&D and working on D&D for many, many years. And so like we have all, lots of us have old buddies we want to see come back.
I'm laughing. Oboe Crazy, we know there's a lot of flump talk in the chat from last time. We're looking at you.
Yep. Well, the flump is actually a great example of love for old things in D&D inspiring some of our work, because when we were working on the player's handbook, the monster manual, and drafting the monsters, almost like putting together a sports team that would make it into that book, there were a number of us who were like, come on, the flump has got to come back, partly because we thought it was cute and funny.
Yeah.
But also it served a world-building purpose for us, and that is another important part of our decision-making process for any of our books, and that is world-building. And so what we wanted to do is show, through the flump, that in the realm of tentacly, aberrant kind of creatures, you can have something that's good. Psionic power in the D&D multiverse is so often associated with creatures like mind flayers and others that dominate, that are forces of cosmic evil. And so we wanted to show with the flump there's a balance in the cosmos. So whenever possible, to rein in our desire to go on a total nostalgia kick, we wed it to world building that we're doing. And when I say world building, I mean big picture world building. I'm talking about the entire D&D multiverse. So not only stories we want to tell about the Forgotten Realms, but stories we want to tell about the Outer Planes, and stories we want to tell about other worlds in the material plane.
Really quickly, I know the flump can be a goofy creature, but to that point, and kind of going back to the different player types and player experiences, there's often that moment of levity that's needed at the table, and to have a benign creature like that. And we had it in Oboe Crazy's game, her live stream game. There was a flump character that came out, and so they're not always ridiculous. Just because they're light and there's levity there, they don't have to be silly or
And that actually gets to another piece, not only when we're deciding on what monsters to include in our game, but even when we're crafting things like subclasses, spells, we're also looking for a range of storytelling tones. We want things that would fit in a horror game. We want things that would fit in a high epic fantasy campaign. We want things that will fit in a gritty campaign. We want things that will fit in a more childlike, playful campaign. And so that's why you'll see that our monsters, again, even in the monster manual, represent a range of storytelling tones. So that's why it was important to us to include some things that are whimsical. That's one of the reasons why the flump is there. That's one of the reasons why the modron are there. It's also, we wanted to make sure to have a range of good creatures. That's why unicorns are there. That's why pixies are there, and sprites and others that could end up being your allies. They could also end up being your foes. Depends on the story the DM is telling.
Right.
But we really wanted to show that D&D, and we do this over and over again, isn't just one type of fantasy. It can be many types of fantasy, and that includes the whimsical. It doesn't all have to be, super serious. No, super serious is fine.
Yeah.
I mean, my current home game is a gothic horror campaign that is serious and often disgusting, although it also has moments of levity, just so that I don't overwhelm my players with horror.
Well, sure. Let's go back to the Avengers. I mean, you need that in just storytelling, it feels like. It helps to break up the mood, the tension, the pacing, just to have those moments throughout.
Yeah.
Let's ask, you were mentioning different types of fantasy. And this is where I start screwing up handles. Swabluberb asks, when are we getting more information on the Fey and Feywild?
So we have been sprinkling information about the Fey and the Feywild in as many books as we can, partly because the Feywild is such an important element of the D&D multiverse. not only as a part of sort of the cosmos's mythic construction, but it's also important for the tonal variety I was talking about. People often want to have these magical, fairy tale-like creatures in certain types of adventures, and so we've made sure we provide a pretty steady stream of those creatures. And each time we do that, you get an additional glimpse of some aspect of the Feywild. We did it in the Monster Manual, we did it in Volo's Guide, we do it again in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes.
Right, I think we had mentioned last time the Eladrin do make an appearance in Mordenkainen's in various ways.
Yes, and in addition to the Eladrin appearing, I'm not sure I mentioned the last time you and I were chatting that in the Elf chapter of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, there is discussion in various places about the role the Feywild has played in the history of all elves, not just the Eladrin. And we wrote that history partly so we could also make it clearer what the relationship of the Eladrin is to their elven kin.
And I will throw out, apropos of just the Feywild and movies, if you have not yet seen Annihilation,
Which I have.
I would also recommend that if you're looking for some sort of Feywild flavor that you might pull in your game.
And also Lovecraftian.
Yes, a weird Lovecraftian Feywild.
It is. For any of you going to see Annihilation, I will warn you, it is more of a horror film than I expected. But in sort of like the original Alien film, this cosmic horror.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, for folks just tuning in, we're talking to Jeremy Crawford. We will be going back, steering into the order domain, continuing that discussion, but we wanted to make sure that we gave due attention to the questions that you kindly asked last time. So let's ask a few more. Share DVI asks, are prestige classes from Unearthed Arcana discarded completely, or do you think there might be a place for them?
So we've explored different approaches to prestige classes, not only since the release of 5th edition, but even before the release of the Player's Handbook. It's something that the team and I looked at, we've tinkered with it, and honestly, anytime we have explored the possibility of doing more work on prestige classes, fan feedback has really been kind of a meh. We have not seen much interest from the community in large enough numbers to justify pushing forward with prestige classes. So that's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is prestige classes in our design framework for 5th edition don't have as ready of a slot as they did in 3rd edition when they first appeared. And the reason why I say that is because of the centrality of subclass in 5th edition. A lot of that sort of distinctive tweaking that you could do to your character with a prestige class in 3rd edition, we now accomplish in 5th edition with subclass. And it's a decision you get to make very early in your career. Now, we do know and recognize that there are times where people want to make a significant character change later on. But what we've discovered is that most people are able to accomplish that with multiclassing. And also with judicious feat selection if a particular group uses feats. So thus far, the message that we have gotten from the community is that there are enough sort of baseline tools to create the different character concepts that people want to create, and that people really see subclass as the main way to take a class that you have and spin it in a new direction. So that like you could play a wizard, for instance, over and over again, and each wizard you make could be very different from each other wizard because of your subclass choice, your spell choice, etc. Same with a class like the fighter. You could each time pick a different subclass, and your experience as a fighter is going to often be dramatically different from the last time you played the class.
So we did have a question on subclasses. Max Zimenez. Not even close, but it's what I got. Do you ever work on subclass options that are strongly tied to non-Forgotten Realms content, like the Athasian Defiler or Eberron Dragonmarked?
Yes, so our subclass design, and this goes all the way back to the Player's Handbook, has always been informed by essentially the whole D&D multiverse. Here's a great example of this, and I think some of you have probably heard me talk about this before. When we were first coming up with the subclass approach for the game, one of the classes that was pivotal in us going in that direction was actually the wizard. And it was because we were looking at different D&D worlds, and we got to Dragonlance and thought, how could we have a single class that once we get to Dragonlance, assuming we go there someday, how could we express the different towers of high sorcery, but all be in the same class? And we'd explored subclass-like things in 4th edition. Again, prestige classes in 3rd are kind of another nod in this direction. Earlier editions of the game have touched on subclass through things like kits. So this is certainly not an entirely new thing for D&D, but for us, we ended up making it one of the foundations of 5th edition class design. And that's all a long way of saying part of that was sparked by actually talking about Dragonlance. And often when we're talking about particular subclasses, some of them are inspired by things in Eberron, some of them are inspired by things in FR, some of them are inspired by things in Greyhawk. Because really, when we do that core class design, it is for the whole D&D multiverse.
And we kind of touched upon that last time we spoke with the various gods even that were mentioned in the order domain. That You wanted to expand sort of the examples that were being used to show how more broadly applicable it seems like they can be.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
All right, so let me ask one more, and then let's take a look at the order domain. Obtuse Anglos asks, Mike was discussing, I believe, psionics in the last hour.
Yes. I caught the tail end of it.
Do you think psi points are essential to the design of the mystic, or could it be built with robust class features?
So this is a question I answered on Twitter a while ago, and there is no essential link in terms of game design between psi points and creating either a psionic class or a psionic subclass or a psionic monster. Psionics really, like divine magic and arcane magic, is much more of a storytelling category that has a variety of effects associated with it because of folklore, comic books, films, etc. So honestly, we could implement psionics in a bunch of different ways. Mm-hmm. We could do it with psionic abilities that function similarly to spells. We could do it with robust class features like you see in a number of our magic-using classes. Like, for instance, you could imagine a psionic class or subclass that has things equivalent to the Warlock's Eldritch Invocations. Mm-hmm. So implementation, really, the sky's the limit. And for us, it's often about what feels best for the story we're trying to tell. And then in the case of the Mystic that we released last year, there we were also exploring being a little more traditional. Because since in the past, the game has often associated psionics with psi points in some form, we thought, well, we'll give it a go and see what people think.
I tried so hard as a young D&D player in 1st edition trying to parse the psionic rules in the back of the player's handbook. It's like, I want to be able to use this. I just have no idea what's going on here.
Yeah. And as I think I have said publicly before, we discussed for quite some time the possibility of having several psionic subclasses in the player's handbook. We explored it as a possibility, especially for the sorcerer. We explored it as a possibility for the warlock. We explored it as a possibility for the wizard. And there are other classes as well that we've also discussed both before and after releasing the Mystic through Unearthed Arcana. So you can imagine a world where there is a Mystic or Scion class, but then also subclasses that are psionic themed in other classes. You could have no dedicated class at all and only have subclasses. There are many, many ways for us to approach the design, which is really a part of the exciting part of our work, is we get to we get to play, we get to experiment, and drill down with the community down to, okay, where's the gem in this pile of boulders? I'm imagining we're in this storytelling and game design quarry, digging for the treasure.
I think we've had that answered in Infinity War.
That's right. We're looking for the Infinity Stones.
Right. There's six of them scattered throughout. Yes, speaking of no class at all sums me up. So why don't we go ahead and move on to the order domain. Hope we addressed at least a few of your questions. Thank you so much for asking questions. It gives us great stuff to talk about and it lets us know what's on your mind. So please do continue to put them in chat. If we don't address them this week, we do go back through every chat and pull out our questions. So let's look at the order domain. This was a recent Happy Fun Hour, a material that made its way into Unearthed Arcana. We spoke 2 weeks ago, and I believe we got as far as the bonus proficiency.
Yes. So we are still in first level, folks.
We're still in the first column of...
But hey, our pace is on track with how a D&D campaign goes, because we expect first level to take 1 or 2 sessions. So here we are on session 2, about to leave first level.
So if we could throw up the order domain, the original page 1, is that what we're looking at here? Yes. So we've gotten as far as...
Hey, look, we have both of them up there.
Oh, yes, sorry. That's the original and the Unearthed
Fabulous.
Arcana
Thank you, Pelham. So one of the things I mentioned last time is anyone who looked carefully at the original draft and then the version that appeared on Unearthed Arcana, about 75% of it, if not more, is actually different. The basic structure is the same, but the content itself, it's almost all new design. This is not unusual for us. We revise often ruthlessly. Sometimes things will make it from first draft form pretty far into the process, but what you're seeing here, where the first draft basically gets savaged and turned into a new draft, which, by the way, will probably get savaged again once we get playtest feedback as we make our way toward a possible final version.
No design survives contact with the player group.
Yes,
that type of
yeah. Because if your focus is on making something that is as fun for as many people as possible, that means letting go sometimes of your initial conception as a designer for what you wanted that thing to be. And you do want to, of course, hang on to the story you're trying to tell, but the story, the overall identity, the archetype, to me, is what's important, not the specific implementation. Until through iteration, you find the implementation that makes the most people happy. All right, let's talk about voice of authority. This ability made it mostly intact from the original into Unearthed Arcana, but there were some important technical differences. For those of you who might not be able to see the text, full text for the old one on your screen, really what this ability says is that you can cast, when you cast a spell on an ally and you use a spell slot of first level or higher, when you cast that spell, your ally can use a reaction to make a weapon attack against a target of your choice.
So that was the original version.
That was the original.
Okay.
Okay, so there are actually some important technical differences between the version that was originally drafted and the version in Unearthed Arcana.
So when you see that original version, what's springing to your mind then? Like what did you see that called out to you that needed to be changed and why?
Okay, so first off, there's a little bit of redundancy in the original. You'll notice it says, and that ally can use a reaction to make a single melee or ranged weapon attack. Okay, all weapon attacks are either melee or ranged. So so I cut the words melee or ranged because I never like rules to offer alternatives in this way because then this suggests there are maybe other alternatives. Like, oh, are there weapon attacks that aren't melee or ranged? And so whenever you're writing rules or homebrewing, you want to try to make it so that your rules do not pose questions that they can't answer, or that really are unhelpful questions. Basically asking that they're making your reader wonder things that aren't about things that aren't even in the game. And so it's sufficient here to just simply say, make a weapon attack.
Right, so inadvertently, by over-explaining a rule, you're inadvertently introducing the potential for confusion.
Exactly. Yeah, and over-explanation is something you always have to watch out for. A great example of where I over-explained is in the player's handbook. So in the fighter, in Action Surge, we give you an action with that feature. That's all that feature does. It gives you an extra action. Now, talking with the team, I was concerned, as were other members on the team, that because bonus actions and reactions and how they work in 5th edition was going to be new for a lot of people, we put a little bit of reminder text in Action Surge that, hey, in addition to this extra action given to you by Action Surge, you still also might have a bonus action and whatever else it is you're doing on your turn. That is helpful text. And I put that in air quotes because it is ultimately not helpful. And we almost always end up regretting it when we put in helper text like that, because it seems at the time like, oh, this will clarify something, but then it's too easy for people to misread it. And sure enough, many people to this day will read Action Surge and they wonder, is Action Surge also giving me an additional bonus action? Which it certainly is not. But I often like, by the way, to point out my own mistakes, because a big part of being able to do this kind of work and do it well is being humble about your own work and being able to assess where you've taken a misstep so that you can learn to do better.
I was going to say, believe it or not, there's another brand that works in this building. And for Magic as well, I know that's a big discussion. What text you're printing on the face of a card? Are you using just the keyword? Are you elaborating on what the keyword is? Or does that potentially cause confusion?
Yeah.
And you can refer to that keyword elsewhere in the rules or online and how it plays into this particular card. But.
Yeah. So almost always, just to sort of give you the principle, almost always watch out for helper text. Unless you can provide enough context for why you're providing it, and also to make it clear it's just helper text and not actually a new rule, proceed with caution anytime you put in that kind of thing. So this even here, this in the original draft saying melee or ranged weapon attack, that's actually an example of unhelpful helper text. It's just a weapon attack. So here's another thing that Voice of Authority had that was a red flag for me. It says that the ally gets to make this attack against a target of your choice. Now, you might read this quickly and think, well, what's wrong with that? So, as written...
I'm just laughing. Justin T. Gann, yes, it is like kids helping.
Yes, it is like the kids trying to help at home. So this text, it works, sure. You can choose somebody for your friend to attack when you use Voice of Authority. But here's the issue. What if everyone else in this encounter is invisible? So one of the things we often have to put into our rules when we refine them is talk about a target that you can see. And so that's why in the new version, it says you get the attack is made against a target of your choice that you can see. Because it's easy to forget that there is actually no general rule in the game that states you must see somebody that you target with an ability. So it's then that puts the pressure on each feature where sight matters for that feature to actually say, hey, you've got to see the person you're targeting with this. Unless that's not the intent. If an ability involves an attack roll, you almost never need to say a target you can see, because our attack rules already tell you what to do if you can't see your target. You have disadvantage on the attack roll, and you might just even be just guessing where they are. But when it comes to saving throw effects Or effects like this, where you're basically just saying, hey, you, something happens to you. It can be important to specify, hey, you need to see this person or hear this person, that sort of thing.
Something happens to you is the best name for a spell or effect.
That's right.
That we should develop.
Yep. Yeah. So you'll see that not only did the new version change a single melee or ranged weapon attack to one weapon attack, and then it also said it has to be a person you can see. All right, there's also a much subtler change that happened here. I won't dwell on this too long, but the original said, once during your turn, when you target an ally with a spell of first level or higher, then your ally gets to do, they get to take their reaction to make an attack. Okay. Reactions, the general rule is, they occur after their trigger has happened. So technically, in the original version, the trigger for this reaction was being targeted by a spell, which is oddly specific. And I'll say this, too specific. Because what that technically means is you would target them, they would get to take their reaction, then your spell would resolve, which could result in some really wacky rules interactions which were not intended by this design. So in the new version, I changed it to immediately after you cast a spell on an ally, then they get to take that reaction. What that ensures is the spell resolves, it kind of tidies up after itself, and then they can take their reaction. So you can now see here, just looking at one sentence, there were basically 3 rules pitfalls. So really, digging in can be a lot of work to tease out all of these things.
Sure, no, but it looks, you take one detail, but it does have broader design implications. Be very concise with your wording. Keep in mind the mechanical triggers and reactions, and just keep it, the language as clean and straightforward as possible.
Yeah, yeah. All right, shall we go into orders demand?
We can. Let's do it.
All right. So at second level, hey, we leveled up, everyone. We're partway through. We're partway through our second session, and everyone at level 2. Okay. So orders demand is the domain's channel divinity option, and the original design really was seeking to emulate the sleep spell in the player's handbook by rolling a bunch of dice, and then you affect a certain number of hit points worth of creatures, and they are subjected to the effects of the command spell. All right, when I got to this rang several alarm bells for me. First off, the command spell already gives you the ability, when you use higher level slots to cast it on other people. So I am rarely open to allowing new design into the game that bulldozes over well-established design that's already there, unless there's a powerful story reason to do it. And so I felt, okay, already that's a knock against this feature, because we already have the ability to cast command on multiple people. And frankly, the version in the player's handbook is more straightforward. The other thing that set off an alarm bell is the fact that actually this is using the sleep spells tech. And I say this is an alarm bell because I'll always in these sessions, I'll try to let you guys see behind the curtain a little bit. The sleep spell in some ways is deprecated design for the design team. This is, I tell people who work on the game, if they're designing spells, do not emulate the sleep spell. Because we only have it in that form, to be totally frank, because that is how it has functioned on and off in the past.
Right.
It was an experiment for us. It works for the sleep spell. It has a uniqueness, and it is not something I actually want to see proliferated. First off, because it keeps the sleep spell feeling distinct, and the sleep spell is iconic for the game. It has been an iconic wizard spell in particular, going back to first edition. It's a really special spell in that way. But I also, though, don't want to see it replicated because I don't want that uniqueness to go away, but it's also complex. And it is a complexity I don't want to see proliferating because, quite honestly, just making targets make saving throws is way simpler. The sleep spell is also, its tech is dangerous to use too often. And we knew this when we designed it. It bypasses our saving throw mechanics. And our saving throw mechanics are in the game as a safeguard, not only to protect player characters from being endlessly wrecked, but also to keep certain NPCs and monsters from being endlessly wrecked by different effects.
Sure.
And even though Order's Demand did correctly say that a creature immune to being charmed was immune to this effect, it still, as designed, could easily have routed around too well the defenses of creatures that in our design of like which saving throw bonuses we've given them, etc., they were meant to be able to largely resist this kind of effect. So I looked at this, I said, this is an interesting idea, which is, I'm going to use a technical term now, which is to ooga booga a big group. that's often my term for just, random magic stuff.
Hand waving, something happens.
Along with this theme of compulsion, of mind control, of imposing order, because as I discussed last time, that's really the story of this subclass. And so I looked at this and thought, how can I maintain this story of this feature and of the subclass, but with a simpler design that doesn't trample over the command spell? And so what I did is now in the new version, have you presenting your holy symbol, as is typical for a channel divinity, and each creature of your choice that can see or hear you within 30 feet of you must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be charmed by you until the end of your next turn or until the charmed creature takes any damage. You can also cause any of the charmed creatures to fall prone when they fail the saving throw. My intent here is, as in the original design, to make this ability useful both in and out of combat. So you can imagine in combat, the Order Domain cleric basically telling everybody quit it by charming them. They're not going to be able to attack the cleric. And if the cleric is feeling like a Bene Gesserit from Dune, can say, using the voice, submit, and everyone can fall prone. But I also wanted, again, this cleric to be able to do that in a non-combat scene, to have, to calm a crowd. This also, by the way, is a way for the cleric to just wander out of an area, essentially getting the effects of the disengage action, because these people who are charmed are not going to be able to attack the cleric. And so this cleric could be surrounded, use Order's Demand, and then just stroll on out. Now, I don't know if those of you listening notice that this new version that I wrote could also use a little bit of refinement, because I just talked about in Voice of Authority the issue of choosing people you can't see, and right here, look what I did. I said the cleric gets to choose people, and I didn't say the cleric has to see them, so bad Jeremy. So we'll get that on our next loop through, because we did say
You can see or?
that can see or hear you.
Yes.
Because part of the story of this,
Yeah.
I made sure that I wanted your targets to be able to see you or hear you when you are radiating out this commanding magic, but neglected to include that you have to see them if you're the one choosing them.
Yes.
Now, I can tell you actually how this goof occurred in my own design. It's because that little bit of you making a choice didn't originally exist in my design. When I redesigned this, I made it so that it worked on everybody who could see or hear you, including your friends. So in that case, you didn't need to be able to see or hear anybody. It was actually at the last minute before I handed this over to you, I suddenly thought, well, the cleric will want to be able to exclude their friends. So I quickly added in your choice, but forgot to put in when I was working too quickly that the cleric needs to see the people that the cleric is excluding from this effect.
Well, as it's being discussed in chat, there is sort of that story element of you've got your dad voice or your mom voice. They might not see where the kids are hiding, but it's like, come on out right now and get in the car. We got to go. And that's still sort of the command is in effect to them, even though you can't see where they are.
Right.
They can hear you.
I'm noticing in chat people asking, well, what's the issue of picking somebody you can't see? Well, the issue, and by the way, it could be also a person, it doesn't have to be a person you could see. It could also be a person you can hear. The point is, we don't want rules that create basically the logic problem of choose the person you don't know is there. We basically need some way to say, choose people who you actually know they're there. And that can be because you see them, you hear them. There are a variety of ways that we could implement this in the rules. The point is, you need to be clear, how is it you're choosing people? Because if you're not aware they're there, and so...
So it's a bit of fair play, it sounds like.
It's a
As a player, I know the person's there, and my character doesn't. And so I have to make sure that my character is acting in a reasonable manner according to the rules.
Right. And we don't want to turn every spell into a mind-numbing negotiation between the player and the DM. And that's why we like the clarity of you have to pick somebody you can hear, someone you can see, that kind of thing. So that, again, it's every time you use this, it's not, all right, now let's negotiate.
The nebulous, I know they're there.
Right,
wow.
right, exactly.
Again, kind of looking at this rule, some of the lessons that sound like be careful in redundancy in language and be careful making use of some of the, I don't know, the platypuses of the game, the unique tech mechanics of the game. I was curious, you had mentioned sleep. Were there any other sort of unique tech features of the game that you would... people might not know, but there are actual physical alarm bells in Jeremy's cubicle area that go off when somebody starts designing using these. But
none are coming immediately to mind. Probably in 5 minutes after we stop, I'll say, "Oh, there are these five." But the sleep spell is a biggie.
Right.
That's one. Often, if its design gets emulated, I'm like, "Whoop, whoop, whoop." Again, I'm seeing all sorts of suggestions in chat. Yes, there are all sorts of ways that you could write targeting somebody you can perceive, whose location who you can see, who you can hear. The point is, whatever route you go in, make it simple, make it straightforward. Don't turn it into a negotiation or an argument. Make it so that everyone at the table, at the game table, can understand pretty darn quickly who is it I can target. Because targeting is just the first part of most magic effects. You don't want the game to bog down before you've even got to what the thing actually does, because you're just trying to decide who you can target. Because again, so often what we're getting at in our design is getting to the story, getting to the fun, getting to the crazy way the DM's going to describe what just happened. Those are the moments we want to get to, and again, not we're going to spend the next 10 minutes negotiating about targets.
So that was Order's Judgment. Anything further to add there? Do you want to move on to Divine Strike?
Hey, we're gonna be crazy and get to another feature. All right, Order's Judgment. So no, not Divine Strike. We'll go to.
Order's Judgment.
Yes,
first.
it's confusing because Orders.
I fell into that exact trap. I went too far ahead because they're not aligned correctly on my sheets of paper.
All right, so you'll see. In the original, there was a second channel divinity called Order's Judgment. All right, this right away rang an alarm bell, because normally I do not like most of our cleric domains to have more than one channel divinity.
Why?
Here's why. Clerics do not get that many uses of channel divinity. They already all have turn undead. I typically only allow domains to have more than one channel divinity if they have obvious uses in different contexts in the game. If they are both combat relevant, I am most likely going to cut one of them, because essentially you have taken up two of the cleric's feature slots with two things that are constantly competing with each other. And the issue with Order's Demand and Order's Judgment is they were both combat relevant, And the second one was offering a juicy damage bonus, and many people, as soon as they're going to get a damage bonus, are going to say goodbye to the thing that doesn't give them a damage bonus, which in this case would mean they would stop using the ability that was really iconic for this domain, which is radiating, this domineering presence to impose order. Also, this was too much of an echo of what's up ahead at 17th level in Order's Wrath, where you are giving everyone extra damage. And so to me, it was also hitting the same design note too much. A domain is not a very large piece of design, so to be hitting the same note twice in such a small piece of design, I generally try to avoid. Although, again, always exceptions can be made if they are interesting enough.
Okay, so Order's Judgment immediately went on the chopping block.
Exactly. Not only did I cut the design, but also made it so that the replacement wasn't even a channel divinity. I wanted something that was going to help this cleric dig in even deeper to their story archetype. And so to pull that off, what I did is, inspired by work we did in the Diviner, in the Wizard, I put together the Order's Dominion feature, which makes it very easy for this domain to happily cast enchantment spells. And that includes not only spells like Command, where you're ordering other people to do things, but also includes some beneficial spells for the cleric's allies, including a spell like Heroism, which is, I mentioned last time, on this cleric's domain list, and there are others as well. And I also wanted this cleric to not hold back using that magic. Clerics have, frankly, a lot of pressure placed on their spell slots because many cleric players like to be healers. Many groups expect the cleric to heal.
That's what I would assume. Yeah.
Clerics certainly don't have to heal. I mean, no one is forced to play their character in any particular way. But again, many people who come to the cleric class do so because they do like healing. And so there's that pressure on the cleric spell slots. Also, as I've already mentioned, damage is always enticing, and clerics occasionally will want to use their spell slots to cast damaging spells. I didn't, for this domain, want those pressures to get in the way of still using these enchantment abilities that impose order. So thus we got this feature, which allows you every time you spend a spell slot of second level or higher to cast an enchantment spell, to then regain one of your expended spell slots, and the spell slot you regain is always of a level lower than the spell you cast, and it can't be higher than 5th level. So it functions like the Diviner's ability in the Wizard. Players in the playtest will let us know if they like this. I think it's a fun way to kind of liberate this domain to use those softy enchantment spells, and we'll find out if players think the same.
Yes, so I guess that's a good point. We are always actively soliciting the feedback on the Unearthed Arcana material. We put up the surveys a couple of weeks after the article goes up, so you've had time to play it, solicit feedback in that case. We work with D&D Beyond these days as well to publish, or I suppose republish the Unearthed Arcana material so that you can use that in your games as well with D&D Beyond tools. So. Yes, please do try out the material, and please do give us your feedback. That's how we know if it's working for you and your tables or not. So, we've got a few minutes left. Do we have time to jump into Divine Strike? Should we save it for next time?
Divine Strike we can jump into because it's super easy. Like I mentioned last time,
let's do that.
Divine Strike is really just an infrastructure piece of a cleric domain. Every cleric domain either has Divine Strike or potent spellcasting. In many ways, it's kind of, you shouldn't even think of it as a domain ability. It's just basically every domain has one or the other in that slot. And then what is special is what damage type we pick. And for the order domain, we have force, although quite honestly, it very easily could have been psychic. And I expect playtesters will let us know what they think, but if I were redesigning this today, given my mood today, probably because we talked about psionics, I would change it to psychic. And honestly, there are bits of design that are subjective like that.
That's the mood chart on the wall. What damage type is everything designed to today?
That's right. Is Jeremy in a psychic mood today? I mean, it's funny, there was a day recently where I was, for some reason, in a radiant damage mood. And so all sorts of things I was designing ended up with radiant damage. And then I reined it in the next day. So we can talk about Order's Wrath next time. Let's see, is there maybe one question from the chat I could answer before?
Yes, sorry. I was completely negligent in terms of the questions this time. We were slicing our way through the order domain. If you do have any questions, we will collect those for next time, but if anyone would like to throw up any quick questions for Jeremy about the order domain or about design work in general, please feel free to do so. As those come in, I'll just make a quick mention that we do have D&D news coming up at 3:30. Greg Tito is out of town, but Nathan Stewart will be manning the chair.
And he is the king of spoilers.
He is. Although, as mentioned at the top of the hour, we've got Stream of Many Eyes information is up on the website now, so he'll be glad to talk further about that. We look forward to everyone who is able to make it to Los Angeles in person. We have tickets available for that final day on June 3rd. Otherwise, we'll be streaming all 3 days, June 1st through 3rd, so please do tune in. So D&D News at 3:30, and the new season of Dice Camera Action with Dungeon Master Chris Perkins will be coming up at 4 p.m. Pacific today. So we've got quite a few questions coming in now.
Lots.
We've got why does healing get spread around to other classes?
Well, we could answer that one. That one's kind of easy.
Okay.
Because this is this is really about one spell. Basically, why did Rangers and Druids get the Healing Spirit spell? Which is in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It is a very good spell, meant to be a very good spell to help beef up Druids and Rangers as healers, especially the ones who want to be healers. But as I've noted on Twitter, we published the spell without a use limit on the spell. Used in combat, the spell really has no problem and is meeting our mathematical expectations. It's when the spell is used out of combat, because of people's ability to jump in and out of the spirit, that spell then goes from, hey, it's kind of a neat effect. There's the spirit hovering there and you can run over and get healed by it. Turns it from that to many groups feeling like, oh my God, we have to have this spell because we can get so much healing out of combat. So I, as I've said publicly, I've had my eye on that spell since the book came out. I've been seeing the feedback, and it is highly likely that the spell will get adjusted in a future printing. I have already on Twitter indicated how we are likely to adjust it, and that is limiting the number of times the spell can heal based on the spellcaster's spellcasting ability modifier, most likely ×2. So that would mean you cast it, and let's say you have a wisdom modifier of +2, then the spirit would heal 4 times. And then if you are all the way up at a 20 wisdom, it would mean that means you have a modifier of +5, and the spell would be able to heal people 10 times, which frankly, sorry, I should have drunk more water. Thankfully, that would actually cap the spell around sort of the maximum healing that we expect for it.
All right. Well, again, thank you for the questions. We'll address a few more of them next time. We're here past 3, so we'll call this a show. But I would like to say again, thank you for returning to the Dragon Plus live stream.
My pleasure.
We, as mentioned, we we like picking Jeremy's brains, so we will have him back quite periodically if that works with your schedule.
Yes. Yep. I'll make time for it.
I'll just make the uncomfortable invite on air so that you're pressured to say yes.
I'm forced. Well, also I realized I can justify being here, which I love, by I can start making it so all of our writers and designers have to watch these videos. Because for those of you watching, I hold sessions sort of like what we're doing now. I hold them with our designers, our writers, our editors, to help them do better and better work for all of you. And so that's often, if you haven't seen me in public for a while, it's because either I'm designing material for their next book, or I'm busy teaching everyone how to design material. So again, if I can just say, watch these videos, then I can appear more often.
Well, there you go. So yes, so we'll have Jeremy probably back in 2 weeks. Next week we're going to be talking to Kate Irwin, looking at some of the art design and concepting that went into Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. So look forward to us then. I'll wrap this up really quickly so that we can change out the set. Pelham can change out the set for D&D News. Again, as always, thank you so much to everyone who takes the time to tune in. We appreciate it very much, and special thanks to our followers and subscribers, of course. As always, Stream of Many Eyes, we will talk about that more at 3:30, and the new season of Dice Camera Action at 4. And yes, as mentioned earlier in the chat, we will work on getting a new emote for Pelham. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.